The behaviour component may flow from the realisation that the computer is a resource that they can use from home, which will reduce personal visits to government departments and other places by them physically. Will make that no longer necessary. Looking briefly now at each of these learning components from a tutor's perspective, firstly looking at knowledge. Bringing about a change in a person's knowledge involves you as a tutor presenting them with new or additional information, helping them compare this with existing information, helping them to integrate this information into existing sets of knowledge, and finally helping them store it. Newman, in his series of booklets on tutoring adults, suggests that the information in this context needs to be presented and offered up in digestible chunks. As a tutor, you may need to encourage your learners to compare, correlate, and integrate this new information through techniques such as Q&A, discussion, reflection, or further research. To help them store this information may involve setting exercises that use the information and reinforce it through repetition and reading. Assessing is another method for helping store information through observation, questioning, and testing. Mind you, any assessment of your client group other than self-paced would need to be fairly soft and non-threatening and probably not referred to as an assessment. Adult learners in this context are usually assessment adverse. Extending knowledge is a cognitive or intellectual activity. As a tutor, you will help your learners acquire information, absorb and understand it. Looking at skills, bringing about change in a learner's skill level involves instruction, demonstration, practice, repetition. As a tutor, you will need a range of strategies that enable you to describe and demonstrate particular skills. This may involve breaking down the skill into sub-skills and having the learner attempt mastery of each sub-skill before putting them all together. You will need to pace the instruction, demonstration and practice in relation to the abilities of the learner. You should provide opportunities for the learner to practice and repeat what they have learned. One of the bad teaching behaviours from my experience is that those with computing knowledge, be it related to the hardware or software, often upon a request for assistance, proceed to fix the problem that was first created and requested their assistance themselves by quickly telling you how do this and then that. This leaves the individual who requested the assistance in the first place none the wiser about resolving the problem next time it arises. So it's important that you actually take the time to step the learner through the issues, through the skills that are required to do whatever it is needs to be done in their learning of those skills. Attitudes. Changes in attitude can bring about new or renewed enthusiasm. Bringing about a change in people's attitude is a complex process. An individual's attitudes are formed from values, feelings, tastes, interests, likes, dislikes, and so on, all of which are linked with personality, generational and societal experiences and so forth. To help people change, refine or develop their attitudes, you need to do this in a climate of trust where people can express themselves openly. You can do this by presenting them with new ideas or information, helping them absorb and understand what you have presented, letting them react to it, and provide ample time for reflection. In relation to behaviour, as a tutor, bringing about changes in behaviour can be even more difficult. Generally speaking, a person's attitude towards something may change more quickly, but his or her behaviour may continue to be driven by old patterns, procedures and habits. To encourage people to learn new behaviours, you may need to introduce them to new knowledge, ideas or skills, encourage them to change their attitudes and behaviour, provide them with an opportunity to decide to behave in a different way, encourage them to put that decision into practice. Behaviour learning can be regarded as dependent on one or all the other three kinds of learning. An individual may decide to change his or her behaviour because of new or better knowledge, because they have acquired a new skill, or because of a change in attitude and therefore choosing to behave differently. There are a number of techniques that can be used in this area of attitude and behaviour change, but we won't explore them here because that's a whole world in itself. Finally, to look at some of the attitudes and attributes of a tutor. A good tutor should know their subject, care, understand adults as learners, be willing to learn themselves, have a desire to share one's knowledge with others, and wish to help adults learn. Obviously, you need to know the subject you are teaching, but you don't have to be a world authority. You need a level of competence that allows you to understand your own strengths and weaknesses in the topic or subject and know where to get any further information that you may lack. But more importantly, your level of competence should be such that you can also see where the kiosk participant, where their learning is coming from, so that you can guide them around the barriers if necessary. Again, caring about your subject and being enthusiastic is important. If your tutoring comes across as a chore, no one gains from that approach. Because adult learning is student or learner-centered, you need to always be considering the learning needs of the student before the demands or disciplines of the subject that you're teaching. You resist the temptation to develop a mystique around the subject and make students become dependent on you as a tutor. Rather, a good tutor encourages students to develop an independence of their own and come to terms with the subject according to their own needs and their own particular ways of seeing the world. Be willing to learn yourself. There will be very few adult learners who will not be able to contribute imaginative ideas, knowledge and skills to the learning experience. A good tutor will welcome these contributions. A tutor with basic subject confidence will likely be a far better teacher with a desire to share it than a subject specialist with no desire to share it. Helping adults learn is such an essential teaching requirement that it should probably occupy more of your time and attention than the subject material itself. And one last point to close this section. The question has often been raised in adult learning circles about whether or not it matters if one is a trained teacher. Over the history of adult and community education, the lack of paper qualifications has rarely disqualified a person from teaching other adults. Adult education has never put a premium on formal qualifications or credentials. Tutors come from all walks of life, including teaching, and all other parts of the community. The practice continues to be to invite skilled, knowledgeable people as tutors. And just moving on now to the last section, the summary, and perhaps at this point others may wish to come in and ask questions or make comments. I think as a result of preparing this session this morning, it has further reinforced my view that apart from the obvious physical effects of ageing, the capacity of older learners to learn is much the same for everybody. The meaning and role of education in society continues to change over time, as do the tools and technologies for learning. The social dynamics of the time we grow up in and the socio-economic effects during those formative years obviously have an influence on the way we view the world around us and the way we learn, but then those features apply to every other generation as well. It's interesting to note that some research done by Dr. Sarojini Choi in Queensland not so long ago on Generation Y showed them to be scanners of information, very superficial readers, and learners who read at a depth that they believe sufficient to pass exams. Boomers, I believe, read and learn differently from that and would approach the whole learning or assessment process differently as well in their younger days. The difference may be a function of age, but it's probably a function of a pragmatic approach to the assessment process. I hope that, to conclude, I hope that you heed the point made at the beginning of this session and that you draw out from it what works for you. And to conclude, happy tutoring. Thanks very much.